Scary Stories 3. More tales to chill your bones. When death arrives, it usually is the end of the story. But in these stories, it's only the beginning. The Appointment. A 16-year-old boy worked on his grandfather's horse farm. One morning he drove a pickup truck into town on an errand. While he was walking along the main street, he saw death. Death beckoned to him. The boy drove back to the farm as fast as he could and told his grandfather what had happened. "Give me the truck," he begged. "I'll go to the city. He'll never find me there." His grandfather gave him the truck and the boy sped away. After he left, his grandfather went into town looking for Death. When he found him, he asked, "Why did you frighten my grandson that way? He's only 16. He's too young to die." "I'm sorry about that," said Death. "I did not mean to beckon to him, but I was surprised to see him here. You see, I have an appointment with him this afternoon in the city." The bus stop. Ed Cox was driving home from work in a rainstorm. While he waited for a traffic light to change, he saw a young woman standing alone at a bus stop. She had no umbrella and was soaking wet. "Are you going toward Farmington?" he called. "Yes, I am," she said. "Would you like a ride home?" "I would," she said, and she got in. "My name is Joanna Finney. Thank you for rescuing me." "I'm Ed Cox," he said, "and you're welcome." On the way, they talked and talked. She told him about her family and her job and where she had gone to school. And he told her about himself. By the time they got to her house, the rain had stopped. "I'm glad it rained," Ed said. "Would you like to go out tomorrow after work?" "I'd love to," Joanna said. She asked him to meet her at the bus stop, since it was near her office. They had such a good time, they went out many times after that. Always they would meet at the bus stop, and off they would go. Ed liked her more each time he saw her. But one night when they had a date to go out, Joanna did not appear. Ed waited at the bus stop for almost an hour. Maybe something's wrong, he thought, and he drove to her house in Farmington. An older woman came to the door. "I'm Ed Cox," he said. "Maybe Joanna told you about me? I had a date with her tonight. We were supposed to meet at the bus stop near her office, but she didn't show up. Is she all right?" The woman looked at him as if he had said something strange. "I'm Joanna's mother," she said slowly. "Joanna isn't here right now, but why don't you come in?" Ed pointed to a picture on the mantel. "That looks just like her," he said. "It did, once," her mother replied. "But that picture was taken when she was your age, about 20 years ago. A few days later, she was waiting in the rain at that bus stop. A car hit her, and she was killed." Faster and faster. Sam and his cousin Bob went walking in the woods. The only sounds were leaves rustling and now and again a bird chirping. "It's so quiet here," Bob whispered, but that soon changed. After a few minutes, the two boys started whooping and hollering and chasing one another around. Sam ducked behind a tree. When Bob came by, Sam jumped out at him. Then Bob raced ahead and hid behind a bush. When he looked down, there at his feet was an old drum. "Sam, see what I found," he called. "It looks like a tom-tom. I bet it's 100 years old." "Look at the red stains on it," Sam said. "I bet it's somebody's blood. Let's get out of here." But Bob could not resist trying the drum. He sat on the ground and held it between his legs. He beat on it with one hand, then the other, slowly at first, then faster and faster, almost as if he could not stop. Suddenly there were shouts in the woods and the sound of hoofbeats. A cloud of dust rose from behind a line of trees. Then men on horseback galloped towards them. "Bob, let's go!" Sam shouted. He began to run. "Hurry!" Bob dropped the drum and ran after him. Sam heard the twang of a bow firing an arrow. Then he heard Bob scream. When Sam turned, he saw Bob pitch forward, dead. But there was no arrow in his body, and there was no wound. And when the police searched, there were no men on horseback, and there were no hoofprints, and there was no drum. The only sounds were leaves rustling and, now and again, a bird chirping. Just delicious. George Flint loved to eat. Each day at noon he closed his camera shop for 2 hours and went home for a big lunch his wife Mina cooked for him. George was a bully, and Mina was a timid woman who did everything he asked because she was afraid of him. On his way home for lunch one day, George stopped at the butcher shop and bought a pound of liver. He loved liver. He would have Mina cook it for dinner that night. Despite all his complaints about her, she was a very good cook. While George ate his lunch, Mina told him that a rich old woman in town had died. Her body was in the church next door. It was in an open coffin. Anyone who wanted to see her could. As usual, George was not interested in what Mina had to say. "I've got to get back to work," he told her. After he left, Mina began to cook the liver. She added vegetables and spices and simmered it all afternoon just the way George liked. When she thought it was done, she cut off a small piece and tasted it. It was delicious, the best she had ever made. She ate the second piece, then a third. It was so good she could not stop eating. It was only when the liver was all gone that she thought of George. He could be coming home soon. What would he do when he found that she had eaten all of the liver? Some men would laugh, but not George. He would be angry and mean, and she did not want to face that again. But where could she get another piece of liver that late in the day? Then she remembered the old woman lying in the church next door, waiting to be buried. George said he never had a better dinner. "Have some liver, Mina," he said. "It's just delicious." "I'm not hungry," she said. "You finish it." That night, after George had fallen asleep, Mina sat in bed trying to read, but all she could think about was what she had done. Then she thought she heard a woman's voice. "Who has my liver?" it asked. "Who has it?" Was it her imagination? Was she dreaming? Now the voice was closer. "Who has my liver?" it asked. "Who has it?" Mina wanted to run. "No, no," she whispered. "I don't have it. I don't have your liver." Now the voice was right next to her. "Who has my liver?" it asked. "Who has it?" Mina froze with terror. She pointed to George. "He does," she said. "He has it." Suddenly the light went out, and George screamed and screamed. Hello, Kate. Tom Connors was on his way to a dance in the next village. It was a long walk through fields and woods, but it was a soft, sweet evening, and he loved dancing, so Tom didn't mind. He had gone only a short distance when he noticed a young woman following him. Maybe she's going to the dance, he thought, and he stopped and waited for her. As the woman got closer, he saw that it was Kate Faherty. They had danced together many times. He was about to call, "Hello, Kate," when suddenly he remembered that Kate was dead. She had died last year. Yet there she was, all dressed up for the dance. Tom wanted to run, but somehow it didn't seem right to run from Kate. He turned and started to walk away as fast as he could, but Kate followed him. He took a shortcut across a field, but still she followed. When he got to the dance hall, she was right behind him. There were a lot of people standing outside, and Tom tried to lose Kate in the crowd. He worked his way to the side of the building, then squeezed up against the wall behind some people. But Kate followed. She came so close she brushed up against him. Then she stopped and waited. He wanted to say, "Hello, Kate," just the way he did when she was alive. But he was so frightened he couldn't speak. Her eyes looked into his, and she vanished. The Black Dog. It was 11 o'clock at night. Peter Rothberg was in bed on the second floor of the old house where he lived alone. It had gotten so chilly he went downstairs to turn up the heat. As Peter was on his way back to bed, a black dog ran down the stairs. It passed him and disappeared into the darkness. "Where did you come from?" Peter said. He had never seen the dog before. He turned on all the lights and looked in every room. He could not find the dog anywhere. He went outside and brought in the 2 watchdogs he kept in the backyard, but they acted as if they were the only dogs in the house. The next night, again at 11 o'clock, Peter was in his bedroom. He heard what sounded like a dog walking around in the room above him. He dashed upstairs and threw open the door. The room was empty. He looked under the bed. He looked in the closet. Nothing. When he got back to his bedroom, he heard a dog running down the stairs. It was the black dog. He tried to follow it, but again he could not find where it had gone. From then on, every night at 11, Peter heard the dog walking in the room above him. The room was always empty, but after he left, the dog would come out of hiding, run down the stairs, and disappear. One night, Peter's neighbor waited with him for the dog. At the usual time, they heard it above them. Then they heard it on the stairs. When they went out into the hall, it was standing at the foot of the stairs looking up at them. The neighbor whistled and the dog wagged its tail. Then it was gone. Things went on this way until the night Peter decided to bring his watchdogs into the house again. Maybe this time they would find the black dog and drive it away. Just before 11, he took them up to his bedroom and left the door open. Then he heard the black dog moving around above him. His dogs pricked up their ears and ran to the door. Suddenly they bared their teeth and snarled and backed away. Peter could not see the black dog or hear it, but he was sure that it had entered his room. His dogs barked and snapped. They darted forward nervously, then backed away again. Suddenly one of them yelped. It began bleeding, then dropped to the floor, its neck torn open. A minute later it was dead. Peter's other dog backed into a corner, whimpering. Then everything was still. The next night, Peter's neighbor came back with a pistol. Again, they waited in his bedroom. At 11 o'clock, the black dog came down the stairs. As before, it looked up at them and wagged its tail. When they started toward it with the pistol, it growled and disappeared. That was the last Peter saw of the black dog. But it did not mean the dog was gone. Now and again, always at 11, he heard it moving around above him. Once he heard it running down the stairs. He never managed to see it again, but he knew it was there. Footsteps. Liz was doing her homework at the dining room table. Her younger sister Sarah was asleep upstairs. Their mother was out, but she was expected back any moment. When the front door opened and shut, Liz called, "Hello, Mama," and her mother didn't answer, and the footsteps Liz heard were heavier, like a man's. "Who's there?" she called. No one replied. She heard whoever it was walk through the living room, then up the stairs to the second floor. The footsteps moved from one bedroom to another. Again Liz called, "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. Then she thought, "Oh my God, Sarah's in her bedroom." So she ran upstairs to Sarah's room. Only Sarah was there, and she was asleep. Liz looked in the other rooms, but found no one. She went back down to the dining room, scared out of her wits. Soon she heard footsteps again. They were coming down the stairs into the living room. Now they went into the kitchen. Then the door between the kitchen and the dining room slowly began to open. "Get out!" Liz screamed. The door slowly closed. The footsteps moved out of the kitchen, through the living room, towards the front door. The door opened and shut. Liz ran to the window to see who it was. No one was in sight, nor were there any footprints in the fresh snow that had fallen. Like cat's eyes. As Jim Brand lay dying, his wife left him with his nurse and went into the next room to rest. She sat in the dark, staring into the night. Suddenly, Mrs. Brand saw headlights come rapidly up the driveway. "Oh no," she thought. "I don't want visitors now, not now." But it wasn't a car bringing a visitor. It was an old hearse with maybe a half-dozen small men hanging from the sides. At least that's what it looked like. The hearse screeched to a stop. The men jumped off and stared up at her, their eyes glowing with a soft yellow light. Like cat's eyes, she watched with horror as they disappeared into the house. An instant later they were back, lifting something into the hearse. Then they drove off at a high speed, wheels squealing, the gravel in the driveway flying in all directions. At that moment the nurse came in to say that Jim Brand had died.